Glen Ridge, and Debbie Nand is a council person? Councilor, thank you, for the town council. They're gonna start a little bit, and we'll do Q&A, but they're gonna start first with a little bit about, and this is being live streamed. It will also be posted on YouTube. So with that said, we're gonna talk a little bit and then we'll take questions. But Debbie, do you wanna give it a start?
Sure, so I'm just gonna give some broad outline of the town council and mayor and our former government in here, and some of the obligations that we have and responsibilities and the time commitment, because we're really excited to get people more involved with the borough. I've been on the council, this is my second term, and I'm going into, it's my second year, maybe third. Anyway, it flies. So in our borough government, we have an elected mayor that's elected for 4 years, and then he or she is generally a non-voting member of the council. We have 6 councilors. They all come up for a 3-year term. At this point, we really don't have term limits, but we do have some long-serving councilors, and we do like that institutional piece, but there's also great value to bringing in new perspective and voices onto the council. 2 seats are up for election every year on the council, and there's a committee structure. And we ask that each councilor serve on 2 committees, and of those 2, you will be chairing 1 committee. So for example, and we rotate. So for example, this year I'm gonna be chairing the Finance and Administration Committee. There's a Public Safety Committee, Community Affairs and Public Relations Committee, a Parks and Recreation Committee, and a Planning and Development Committee. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about those committees in a bit. In Glen Ridge, we have a borough administrator and a professional staff, and they run the town. The mayor and the council, our role is an oversight role, especially from a fiscal perspective, but by no means am I going to be calling in to the borough hall and asking someone to expedite a permit for someone in town. That is like absolutely a big no-no. So we have a great staff here. Mike Kelly is our borough administrator. We have a deputy administrator and planner, Eric DeLine, as well as a staff that works very hard. We meet twice a month on Mondays. We appreciate the Board of Ed working out our schedule, so if you're really enthusiastic, you can attend both meetings in a given week. And with the exception of July and August, where we meet once a month on Mondays. Right before the meetings, we have what we call our council workshops. They're generally an hour, so at like 6:30 we'll come together to go over the agenda, discuss any issues that we need to discuss together, and then we'll come into the council meeting. Those are open to the public, the workshops, unless we move into an executive session to talk about personnel issues or other litigation, confidential matters. We have a reorganization meeting for the council every January, so obviously the election is in November. New members come and get sworn in January in our first meeting, and then the councilors will then be assigned to our committees, and you certainly can, be requesting to go on certain committees or whatnot. Between meetings, there are, we all have borough email accounts that we are, responsible for keeping up with and checking. We might get some updates on legal matters or other items from our attorney, but we're not going back, we're not going back and forth on email or having a quorum or discussing matters like that. That's not appropriate. And so that is some of the work in between meetings is just keeping up with any correspondence. Going back to the committees, for example, on our Public Safety Committee, that actually meets monthly with Chief Quinn, our Chief of Police, and one of our counselors is always appointed as a police commissioner that is assigned over to the police department. And the Public Safety Committee, we are right now discussing a lot about pedestrian and traffic safety in town. We heard a lot from folks that that's a big concern. And you might have heard we've been installing new pedestrian crossing signs, flashing lights, going after grants from the state to put in like safe routes to school, upgrades around the high school in particular. And so this will be all discussed, and it's very, and then we also have report outs from the chief on arrests and all sorts of required data that they're required to collect. We are seeing that every month coming over from the police department. The finance and administration chair presents the annual budget for the town in one of the town meetings. I'm actually going to be taking some training next week. Even though we all know how to do a budget, municipal budgeting and financing is a little interesting, so I want to make sure I'm up to snuff on that. And then for the planning and development committee, they really act as a liaison, and we often have a counselor who will sit on the planning board and the board of adjustment and the historic preservation commission. So that all flows through there, and that counselor will do report outs as necessary to the council. So that's the mayor and council, but there's a lot of other opportunities to serve the borough through the borough. I'm not even going to touch on the myriad of volunteer opportunities that are available in town and that you can serve on. So I've mentioned a few. We have a board of adjustment. That is just what it seems when you need a variance from zoning or something like that, or which is our land use, how we all develop our land use in town. That goes before the board of adjustment. The board of health. We have shared services with Bloomfield for our health department, and they're very good. I have been on and this is where I actually got my start in Glen Ridge on the CCC many years ago, and then I have served on the Environmental Advisory Committee for over 10, 15 years now. There's a municipal TV advisory committee. There's obviously the Historic Preservation Commission, the Library Board of Trustees, which I know just had a big call for nominations and had a lot of great candidates, which got me very excited. There's a Municipal Alliance Committee, which has some state funding that comes in to help at the high school. There's obviously the planning board, and we also have a very active shade tree commission that does a lot of work in town with all of our various shade trees. So, we can always share information via Yin to you guys about what that looks like. But, serving on the council, we're non-partisan for the most part, and it's a very consensus-driven on the council, and you have to leave your egos at the door, right? So we doesn't mean that we don't have differing opinions or perspectives on the council, but we're gonna talk it through. We're gonna talk about what's going on and best for our constituents, and work that out together. The things that I don't want to speak on behalf of the CCC, but a commitment to public service and experience with volunteering and boards can be very helpful experience coming onto the council. We have a township attorney who advises us. Even though I'm an attorney, I would never put that hat on at the council. We have professional staff. We have a clerk who helps with all the details of helping run the meetings, as well as engineering services. So while all that's helpful as professionals, there's a myriad of experience that folks can bring to the table, and representation of everyone in our town I think is really important to have on the council. So that is my spiel with notes.
Wow, you are a hard act to follow.
From Betsy, I will take that any day.
The Board of Ed, a lot of what she said applies to the Board of Ed, but we'll get a little bit specific here. The Board of Ed has 9 members. They are elected in groups of 3, staggered, so each year 3 seats become open. Incumbents may run again, or they may retire and make room for newcomers, both of which happen. We are a body independent of, but cooperative with our friends in town government. We are ultimately responsible to the State Department of Education, which is a cabinet level department, which is part of the executive arm of the state government. And the Board of Ed oversees the operations of the district. And when you go for your basic board member training, which every board member is required by law, in your first year, you go for board member training, which is provided by the New Jersey School Boards Association. And it is board member 101. But what they always tell you at the top of the session, and probably again at the end, is the Board of Education's job is not to run the schools, but to make sure they are well run, which speaks to what Deb was saying about professional staff. Like the borough, the district is run by professional staff. The superintendent, if you liken that position to the corporate world, he is the chief operating officer. Dirk Phillips, our chief operating officer. Our chief financial officer is our business administrator, Barbara Murphy. She is also the board secretary, so she takes care of the official business of the Board of Education. That doesn't mean typing the agendas. It means, she does the minutes for our meetings and takes our correspondence when it comes in and just processes it. We answer our own correspondence. We meet usually twice a month, except in July where we meet once. We don't generally meet in August, although if there is a reason to do so, then we can call a meeting, as long as we can get a quorum, which is 5 of the 9 members. Like the council, we use the committee system. We have several standing committees. We have finance and facilities, policy and personnel, curriculum, negotiations, and communications. And each of those committees, with the exception of negotiations, meets probably once a month, especially during the school year. Negotiations meets more frequently when we are actively negotiating. And we have 2 bargaining units in Glen Ridge. We have the Glen Ridge Education Association, which is our teachers, nurses, secretaries, custodians, anyone who is not an administrator or an administrative support person. For example, the secretary to the superintendent, administrative assistant to the superintendent is a administrative support. So just about everybody, with the exception of a small group of administrators, is part of the GREA, with whom, as most of you know, we just concluded negotiations. Usually union contracts are 3 years in duration. Our current contract that we signed, we ratified last month and signed, I signed off on it just yesterday, goes for 3 years. So it goes from July 1st, 2022, and the contract is retroactive. So our employees will get retro checks for any pay and benefits that they were entitled to from July 1st, 2022. The contract goes from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2025. And then the administrator's contract comes up for negotiation next year. So in the probably in 2024, we'll start negotiating with them. And the administrative support personnel, their compensation usually follows the percentage increases that we give to our administrators. So, so those are our standing committees. Each one has 3 board members, plus the board president sits on all committees. And that is not because the board president is omnipotent. That is because it helps to coordinate the activities of all the committees. We also have a liaison system where we send board members out to all kinds of organizations, the 5 homeschool associations, the Glen Ridge music parents, the gas lamp players, you name it, we have a liaison for that group. And their job is to just attend the meetings, report out on what the board is doing, and be the ears of the board to take back to the Board of Education what those groups are doing or any concerns they might have. Because we realize that not everyone can come to our meetings, even though we love it when people come to our meetings. So we try to have that kind of outreach. Let's see. We also have a board attorney, just like the council does, and we have, at various times, we've had up to 3 attorneys on the board. But again, they are not there to act as board attorneys. Our board attorneys are specialists in school law, and they help us with everything from negotiations to, you know, all the strange legal questions that come up in the board. We take care of your two most precious assets, your children and your money. So sometimes that requires getting legal advice. Let's see, I'm forgetting something, I'm sure. We do not, many people, especially in this day and age, have ideas about what boards of ed do. We approve all expenditures of the district, and you'll see that on our agendas when they go out. We oversee the budgeting process, which is taking place right now, and within 48 hours of today, we will know our state aid for this coming 23-24 school year. And that's very important because our budget, the preliminary budget, has to wait for completion until we get those state aid figures. I was at the State House today for the governor's budget speech. It sounds reasonably promising, but we won't know for 48 hours till those numbers come in. State aid makes up about 5% of the district's budget. The rest is mostly from property taxes because, as you know, we don't have a lot of commercial ratables in Glen Ridge, so the vast majority of the school budget comes from your property taxes. And I should say that of our budget, over 80%, up to 85% sometimes, is salaries and benefits. So the amount of discretionary money we have beyond that is relatively limited. And we are bound by the 2% property tax levy cap that was imposed back in 2010. Prior to that, we had 4% tax levy cap, and one can argue all kinds of things about property tax levy caps. On the one hand, it does limit the amount that you will pay, although property taxes in New Jersey historically never go down. But it also limits what the district can do, particularly when you're negotiating contracts and things. You can imagine if salary and benefits are 80 or more % of your district budget, and the rate of inflation is what it is now, and you naturally want to compensate your employees appropriately. But if the rate of inflation is 8% and all you can raise from property taxes is 2%, you have a tough negotiation. And we love our employees. We have a relatively low rate of employee turnover, which is excellent. In the past, since COVID, and with the ongoing New Jersey teacher shortage, which is critical, the governor addressed it a little bit today in his address, the market for educators and education support personnel has become very volatile statewide and also nationwide. So, and it's going to be that way for a while. If educators and education support personnel are the sellers of education services, it is a seller's market right now. So, particularly in high need specialties, districts tend to, you're forced to sort of poach from each other. We have long heard about critical shortages of teachers in the sciences, in the STEM subjects, science, technology, math, but now we have shortages across the board. It used to be in Glen Ridge when we would advertise an elementary opening, we would get one of those big mail containers full of resumes. Of course, now resumes are online, but you get the equivalent of that. Now, that is not the case anymore. And if we have, say, a science or a math opening, we're lucky to get maybe 1 or 2 resumes. So that is one of the great challenges of the district, and I would say probably the greatest challenge. I mean, our finances are always a challenge given the circumstances I just described. Staffing right now is a huge challenge, and just trying to continually adapt to the needs of the community, the needs of our students, to get our students launched into life with a great chance of success. So that is the Board of Education story.
Thank you so much. So, first of all, I want to thank Betsy and Debbie for doing this once again. They are not only, they take their time, but this town thrives on volunteerism. And as Debbie says, whenever you volunteer, you really need to check your ego because that's the only way that it works. We're going to take some questions. If anybody has any, this is probably a good time to ask. I do want to point out that if you are on the town council or if you serve on the Board of Ed, you cannot serve on the CCC, so that there's no conflicts. So.
And there's no compensation for the board or
Just the thanks
Yeah, I mean, Betsy and Debbie spent, and the whole town council, the whole board of ed spent countless hours every month for us and for our children. So, and it's a hot seat. I mean, it's a little bit of a hot seat sometimes.
It's a little, yeah.
A little bit, some hot seat. But we're extremely grateful, and sometimes it doesn't seem like it, but we are extremely grateful.
You know what, I think, won't speak, it is a privilege. It is a privilege. You walk up and down the streets in Glen Ridge, and yes, our district has issues like every district does, but it's just such a privilege to serve the town, I would say. The town has been very good to me, and I try as much as I can to return that favor, and I know you do as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any questions? Any questions about the CCC?
I'm just sort of interested in, one of the discussions right now is the whole not in my backyard, and it seems like in New Jersey, there's kind of a trend to encourage multi-unit dwellings, you know, especially near to train stations and things like that. And we happen to just be at the Historic Preservation Commission when the final approval for the big apartment went in, and so we learned a little bit about it. We were just sort of fascinated, and so I would be curious to hear kind of, I tried to find things in the newspaper, but there's not a lot written about it. Like, there was just a big thing in the New York Times about it, and they didn't even mention New Jersey hardly. They were talking about like Colorado or Oregon or something. I was like, look across the river, talk about what's going on here, but they didn't. But anyway, I'm just curious, sort of, what are the courts saying, like, because it felt like the judges were being sort of activists. How does it impact the school board? How does it impact, right?
Well,
It's
I
not
mean,
supposed
I
to
think
be.
this is probably a better discussion to have outside of this. This is actually a discussion to talk about how,
Oh,
what's
sorry.
needed for a
But I guess
a
that's
candidate.
Well,
yeah.
yeah, no, let me answer it in a way about how the town works, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and what the council's role is at, and the board. So, we have a land use guidance document in our town called the master plan. This is required by law, and it says this is how we want our town to look or grow, and there's certain requirements around it, including there'll be new requirements around resiliency. We have to start thinking more and writing it down about climate change and how we respond to that. We know we've had localized flooding here in town due to climate change. So that's like the guidance document, and then from that falls our zoning and ordinances. And the whole town is designated into single family homes with frontage requirements, but there are areas in town, including around where it makes sense, for multifamily homes. That is all zoning, and that would obviously come in between if you have a development or your permit planning board or board of adjustment. So I'll bring that back. Affordable housing and housing for our families and making our town accessible for everyone is a completely different issue, and it is there hasn't been a statewide policy on that in a while. It's kind of lapsed, and the courts have taken that over. So when a developer, and this is happening all over New Jersey, can accumulate parcels or have enough land accumulated to do that. For a long time, Glen Ridge has not had what we call a developable parcels. We're built out. We are built out. We are a ring community of an urban area. That happened. We have an obligation and a responsibility to, provide for everyone. And, I'm proud of that. I don't mean to stump a bit, but we do have folks who work in town or who live in that facility now, in the complex, and that's wonderful. But we try to understand the context of the town, the historic preservation, and do what we can at a planning level and make it clear, 'cause that's the town's job, right? Be like, here's our standards, here's our expectations, and then it's very transparent.
But then it goes to the courts if there's no agreement, like
It
even
will.
with your rules, okay.
It will, and
Yeah, that's all I want to understand, like, in the structure, I don't need.
it
like,
will, and
political,
that's for every town now. We were actually in settlement negotiations, and we didn't go to court. We didn't,
For Baldwin Street, right?
Yeah, no, we took care of that, yeah.
And it is one of the big, were we to have development, for example, Baldwin Street, the question we ask is, how many students are going to be in those units? It depends on the number of 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms.
Mhm.
We do have a good school system. People are anxious to get into it, and we have a convenient commute, those two things. And so we asked those questions. And the other development kind of issue we had was when we acquired what is now the central school. There was some interest from developers in that piece of land. And as Debbie says, we don't have much buildable land here. And our elementary schools were bursting at the seams. Not that we have more human beings in Glen Ridge, but we have more small human beings in Glen Ridge. And so we felt that that building, which was a former school until 1980, was perhaps the only opportunity we would have to expand. And so, first we went to the council, who had been approached by the developers, and over the time, we developed a plan. All schools have to have a long-range facilities plan for all your facilities, which you submit to the state every 3 years. And we decided to try it. It was sort of the concept of the bumblebee is technically not really able to fly, but it lifts off every day. Well, we were technically not really able to do the central school, but thanks to the generosity of the community and the incredible work of our employees, it lifted off, and now we have the central school. And it's an asset, we are about to undertake in the next year or so probably a demographic study, which you should do every 5 years or so, just to see where your population's headed. If we ever were to have a dramatic dip in school-age children, which we don't anticipate because of the way the demographics of this town work, we still have that space. We have it for swing space if we're doing restoration, renovation on the other buildings, all kinds of things. So it is an asset. It was a great leap of faith, but it was a case where we were able to head off development and put that parcel to a use that was good for the town, that the town needed, and with the help of our friends in town government.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll say good night to everybody. All right, well, thank you very much, Betsy and Debbie.
Thank you.